Hello and welcome to 10 Lessons It Took Me 50 Years to Learn, where we dispense wisdom, not just mere facts, to an international audience of rising leaders. My name is Robert Hossary and I'm your host. This podcast is sponsored by Professional Development Forum, which helps diverse young professionals of any age accelerate their performance in the workplace. On this podcast, you'll hear honest, practical advice that you can't learn from a textbook, because it took us 50 years to learn this stuff. Today's guest is Jeremy Richman. For more than 20 years, Jeremy has been helping clients go to market with powerful messages and branding and communications. Jeremy has worked closely in the financial and professional services sectors, amongst others. But Jeremy's personal passion is animal welfare. For many years, he has volunteered his resources to help Voiceless, the Animal Protection Institute, with their branding and their communication. And in 2019, he joined the board of Greyhound Rescue in a voluntary role of Director of New Projects. Jeremy, welcome to the show and thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm flattered to be asked.
Well, you're always welcome, Jeremy. You've got so much to offer. You've been around for a while, a little longer than me, but we've known each other for a while as well. So let's. I want to start this off with the one question that we always ask our guests, and that is, can you remember your very first business lesson?
Yes, I can. It stuck. I was a student. I studied advertising and marketing in the UK, and somehow I was able to get into what was then the only copywriting course in the whole of the UK and Europe, and it was fun and it was creative, and in many ways it couldn't be much further removed from reality. So after I graduated, I shopped my portfolio around a few agencies and marketing companies in London, and I was convinced that my creative genius would quickly land me a job, and it didn't. And then at one interview,
in other words, you were young.
I was young and more than a little bit naive. But at one interview, I got some really useful and very, very painful advice. And this person told me, go and spend a year in sales, any sales. And I did, and it was bloody tough. I worked at a company that developed film and prints for professional photographers. I ended up selling advertising space for the Daily Telegraph in London. That was back in the days, actually, when it was on Fleet Street. And I really learned the tough lesson that if I'm going to achieve any success at all in my chosen career in advertising and marketing, it's not going to be because people admire my witty headlines, and it's not going to be my job to impress my colleagues. My job is to sell, or to help my clients sell. And I needed to understand what people have to read and hear to turn themselves into buyers. So that was my first lesson. It was before my career.
That was excellent advice, though. That was excellent advice. Do you look back at it now and think to yourself, I am truly grateful?
I am truly grateful for the advice. I'm also truly grateful for all those people who turned me down and forced me to take the kind of work that I didn't want to do and thought was, I suppose, in a way, beneath the creative work that I assumed I'd be doing. But when you go out and you try and sell and you realize just how hard that is, and to realize how hard it is to do that remotely when you're not actually sitting face to face, you're doing this through advertising and marketing on behalf of someone else. Yeah, that was a very, very productive lesson.
Oh, that's brilliant, because I have, as you know, I have throughout my career met many marketing professionals, and they don't have your level of experience in sales. They don't understand what it means.
Oh, you mean I'm old?
They don't understand what it means to talk to a client. So you know, the story you've just given us, the anecdote you've just given us, is, to me, I wish every creative person went through that. They would understand the whole sales process so much better, and they're creative. Their bylines, their jingles, whatever the hell they're doing, is going to be so much more on point.
Yeah, you're right. I think you should do the rest of this podcast. I'll just go and have a scotch.
That was your lesson, Jeremy, not mine. All right, well, let's get started with your 10 lessons. You sent me a list of 10 lessons that took you 50 years to learn. Let's start with lesson number 1, moments of truth. What are moments of truth?
I mean, this is a really big topic. It could be a podcast on its own, just focusing on this one. But the moments of truth are when you find out whether the people you're dealing with, the companies you're dealing with, when things go wrong, when the chips are down, who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with people who are standing behind their promises, living up to the hype they've created, or do they all just sort of fall apart? And look, at a personal level, at a business level, there are companies that I will never, and people that I will never buy from again, never do business with again. And there are companies who will always be first and possibly the only ones on my shopping list. And often the difference between those two is what they did in those moments of truth. I mean,
Do you have an example, Jeremy, of something, or a company, or, you know, you don't need to name names, but an organization that has rocked you to this epiphany?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'll get to a couple of examples if I may, but a gentleman by the name of Jan Carlson, he was the CEO of Scandinavian Air Services. I don't know if you read his book. I mean, we're talking prehistory here. It was the 1980s. But he wrote a book, coincidentally, called Moments of Truth. And there is actually an anecdote at the very beginning of that book, and it starts with the story of this businessman who had left his plane ticket in his hotel room, and this was decades before you could check in with your phone and do all those sort of things. So when he got to the airport without a ticket, the airline's check-in staff were 100% within their rights to say, sorry, no ticket, you don't get on the plane. But instead, they did absolutely whatever they could to make sure he got on his flight anyway. And that included calling his hotel, verifying that his ticket was actually on his bedside table where he said he'd left it. And they sent a car to pick it up, and meanwhile printed out a substitute ticket just in case the car didn't bring the ticket back in time. And I can't vouch for what this man's attitude to that company was afterwards, but if it was me and they flew the route that I wanted to fly on, I wouldn't even consider another airline after that. Let me give you a bit of a negative and a positive anecdote, that things that have happened to me. And in my career, I've worked with a couple of clients who have gone bankrupt. One of them was a partner in a professional services firm, a big global name, and he owned a retail business in, I think, what is now termed a side hustle. And things went pear-shaped, and he lost a lot of money, and he behaved impeccably. He saw it as his personal business, and he saw himself as personally responsible for it, and he made a point of paying back every one of his creditors over time, when legally he could have actually skirted that obligation.
Because what you're talking about is integrity. This is how I've translated what you just said. It's understanding a person's integrity. And if they have integrity in the way they deal with you, they will always have integrity. If they don't, then you're pretty much banking on the fact that these people, or this person that you're dealing with, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's in business, is going to let you down one way or another.
Yeah.
I have experienced this. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced this. And, you know, moments, I see what you mean by moments of truth. And again, the word integrity is the only thing that comes to mind, because if you are not true to your word, if you are not true to the relationship you have built, then you're not. Then you're not worth following up. You're not worth having that relationship with. So I get it. I get it, Jeremy. I think it's very clear, and it's also something that people need to grasp. And obviously, you have had experience with people who don't have that personal integrity or the professional integrity that you needed from them. And that's the thing. We need other people to have a level of integrity so we can trust them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you just see the way some people are letting down a company that otherwise does have integrity.
Yep. Yep. We've all seen that too, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I will give you this example. We can leave it in, take it out. But when we were renovating the house, we built a new bathroom and we put in a strangely expensive tempered glass sink. And it gave an otherwise fairly humble bathroom an air of sort of style and luxury, and it was good to have. And the company's brochures were, and their website, of course, full of all these promises about product quality and looking after their customers. And then one day this sink cracked. Now, it wasn't our fault. We didn't drop anything in it. The crack was actually internal. The external, the top and underneath was still smooth, but it was a very loud, very large, very visible crack. And when I called the company's Australian office, and I was told, and this is pretty much word for word, the product is out of warranty. You've enjoyed it for several years. Get over it. Now that was a moment of truth. Then they got one back because it's a very large American company. They pull in several $1 billion a year in revenue. It's still owned and run by the founder, or the founder's family anyway. So I did a bit of digging, found an email address, wrote to the CEO, quoted what I was told, and also threw in some quotes from their website about their customer charter. And not long after that, I had a phone call back from the Australian company saying, you can have any sink at all you want from the catalogue. Sorry, we don't sell the one that you had anymore. But help yourself to anything, free of course. And to me, again, there's a useful, very practical lesson here. And that's, there's a lot of content on a company's website about how good their products are, about how good their customer service is, how wonderful their after-sales support is. So if you have a problem with a company and they're not behaving the way they said they will, just quote these things back at them. That's a moment of truth they actually have to deal with.
That was great. Let's move on to your second lesson, which I think actually links or is connected to your first one. So lesson number 2, value people by what they contribute, not by what they take. So I think I understand that, but explain to us a little more.
I think you and I have probably gone through a very similar process over the years. You just learn to value people by a very different set of measures than perhaps when you start your career. And the more I reflect on this, the more I realize that I and many others have shown far too much respect for people based almost exclusively on what they've managed to extract from society, rather than on what they've contributed. And look, honestly, expensive cars, luxury homes tell you very, very little about a person's character. And I think we need a different filter. We need a different framework in which we're going to look at businesses and measure the benefits they generate for our community. And I've got huge admiration for people like Bill and Melinda Gates, and in Australia, people like Brian Sherman and his daughter Ondine. These are people who have accumulated significant wealth and could do nothing for the rest of their lives except indulge themselves in luxury. And yet they've devoted their money, their knowledge, their network, their time wholeheartedly to causes that they really care about, to try and achieve stuff for others. And I really do take my hat off. for them.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be wealthy to be a contributor. And we've just seen this now with this current pandemic. I mean, it's underscored the life and death role of frontline medical staff and even people who clean places and make it safe for employees to go to work. And we know the enormous contribution that's made by people who work in areas like aged care and work with people with disabilities. And we obviously know what a difference teachers make that can influence a person from childhood through to their entire life. So that's what I mean by valuing people by what they contribute.
Yeah. No,
but there's also those people who take. Sorry, after you, Robert.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I look with a mixture of sort of anger and despair at the kind of exploitative practices that we see, such as 0-hour contracts. And I don't actually know if they've come to Australia or not, but they force vulnerable people to accept totally insecure employment with no health safety net, and they wrap it up in cute phrases like the gig economy. And I just wish we had a stronger community backbone and actually shun these people and these organizations for the way they deplete what we have as a community instead of contribute.
Yeah, no, I'm. You're not going to get an argument from me. I'm on that bandwagon with you, and I read very recently again a celebrity who is wealthy. So I'm talking about Dolly Parton, who's a millionaire.
Oh yeah.
And I read recently when it was discovered that her foundation helped promote or helped research the coronavirus vaccine that we've got now, or the COVID-19 vaccine. Some smart poster put in there, she could be a billionaire if she didn't give away all her money. But she's still got more money. She's given away all her money, and she's still got more money than you and I ever will have. So the question I've always asked is, how much is enough? And people like Dolly Parton, people like Bill Gates, as you've mentioned, these are people who are doing things for society with their wealth. So I'm not going to get into, the social aspect, shall I put it that way? But I agree with your sentiments. I agree with that. If more people did more for their fellow human beings, we might be in a much better place to live.
Did you by any chance see any of the interviews with Dolly Parton?
Yeah, I did. She's very, very down-to-earth, wonderful person.
But could you see the way her face was just lighting up as she was talking about her involvement in this and feeling that she's contributed something? I mean,
yes. Yeah,
I mean,
and that's what it's all about. And it's also leading to your point, well, supporting your point. Speaking of which, lesson number 3. Okay, now, Jeremy.
Sorry, Robert, do we have a moment just for one other
sure.
angle on this one?
Sure.
Because I think there's something else that's happening that I find particularly troubling. And it's, you take an idea like AirBnB. I mean, such a lovely, lovely concept. You've got a spare room in your house that you can offer to a paying guest. Tourists can benefit from your local knowledge. If they're lucky, they can tap into your network a little bit. And somehow we're taking these lovely, rich, community-spirited ideas and then morphing into some sort of avaricious business practice that, okay, it's making some people into billionaires. It's enabling other people to turn from property investment in apartment buildings, they're turning them into unlicensed hotels. You've got neighborhoods finding that their peace is completely shattered by permanent party houses. Local residents are being locked out of the local rental market. And it's sad to see that we start things off with what at least looks like incredibly good intent. And it gets taken off
Jeremy, that's been the state of the world forever. Do you think that
griping about it?
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean,
but
I am
seriously,
British by birth. It is a birthright.
It is a birthright for the British. I agree. But I mean, if you have a look at Nobel, right? Why do the Nobel Prizes exist? Because he was so riddled with guilt for inventing, explosives. If you have a look at CFCs and lead in petrol, and a lot of those things, the inventors of well, it was the same inventor actually that put lead in petrol and invented chlorofluorocarbons. That's all right, I'll edit all that out. But, we've had this in our history forever where people have a good idea, an idea or a development that would benefit humankind, and yet it's perverted. Or we just don't have enough knowledge at the time for the inventions. So it's happened before, it'll continue to happen again. The problem that I see with what you've just said, not with what you've said, but to add to your comment, is that we have become a society that is wrapped around collecting stuff.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if you've heard George Carlin's comedy routine about stuff. If not, I strongly urge you to go to YouTube and look him up. But it's true, stuff. Why do we need all this stuff? Yep. So, and again, this is actually pretty good segue to your next point number 3. Buy now or, well, I mean, we all need more stuff, Jeremy. So, I understand the buy now, but what is the or? Or what?
Well, it's always buy now or we're going to have to offer you a better deal later. And I think this is one of the more significant lessons of my life, and it comes with age and experience. But it's learning how to deal with or push back at pressure. Now, this is sales pressure, but there's all kinds of other pressure. But learning to deal with it has also had a big impact on my decision making. I mean, obviously, you get pressure from people who want to close a sale now, right?
Yeah.
Telling you that you have to buy now, and yes, I complete that sentence in my head with, or we may have to offer you a better deal later. And look, I'm not going to claim to be a great negotiator, but I think we're all unbeatable negotiators when we know what we want and we're genuinely prepared to walk away when we can't get it. Because there's always going to be another deal. There's always going to be another investment opportunity, another business opportunity. And I think also understanding that from a buyer's perspective has helped influence my own conduct when I'm selling my company's services to prospective clients. And that sort of works in 2 ways. Firstly, understanding just how counterproductive pressure from my side can be, this buy now, or you just kind of appear a bit desperate. But also pushing back at clients, and if you excuse the paraphrasing, know the price, but don't or choose not to comprehend the value. I'm not going to undersell my services. If clients are not willing to pay a fair price, then we're probably not well suited anyway.
And that's an important lesson. That is incredibly important for anybody in business, in sales, or in life, and I'll get to that in a sec. But if the buyer or the seller is not prepared to recognize the value of the relationship of the deal, walk away. And again, in life, it's the same thing. If you've got a partner that doesn't recognize how important you are in their lives, maybe that's not the right partner. And I'm not giving life advice here. I'm just, I'm seeing the parallels between them. Okay, well, let's look at lesson number 4. Let a good cause find you and embrace it. Now, I've known you for a while, Jeremy, and I've known you've had other causes that you're still pursuing, which I make fun of you about, which I won't do at this stage. But I had no idea until very recently, until our last communication, maybe, several months ago, how passionate you are with this particular cause you found, with the whole animal rescue.
Mm. Well, this actually started with my two children. My daughter in particular, she opened my eyes to the animal welfare horrors that are going on. And many of us, and I was guilty of this for probably too long a part of my life, we just willfully avoid seeing it. We just don't want to know. And when you do delve into the scale of suffering is huge. I mean, we're talking beyond huge. We're talking billions. And I think it's with good reason that animal welfare has actually been flagged as one of the next great social justice movements. And by the way, as an aside, even for those people who don't care about animal welfare, it's having a very, very significant and growing impact on the investment market and is deemed a serious business risk as well for those organizations that are still heavily involved in it. But this cause really gripped me. And as you said, it's the cause that sort of shapes my endeavors outside of paid work and will undoubtedly be a cause I support for the remainder of my life. And as you generously said at the beginning, we've donated a fair bit of time to Voiceless over the years. Obviously, we didn't charge them for it. I find the term pro bono a little bit pretentious, although I only found out recently that it's actually short for pro bono publico, meaning for the public good, which I probably should have known, but didn't know. Anyway, Voiceless was a wonderful organization. Primarily, it was focused on trying to change government policy and shape the minds of young lawyers. And it's now sort of shifted its focus a bit more to education. And for anybody in my sort of space, that was actually our first major non-paying client. And one of the things that I learned very quickly there, or concluded very quickly, is that if you've got a non-paying client, you've got to treat them exactly the same way that you would a paying one. You have to schedule and prioritize their work and set the same quality standards that you would for somebody else. You can't sort of go, well, that's a non-paying client. I haven't got time for that. I'll do that. I'll get back to them when I can. And then the Greyhound thing, 2018, October the 12th, 2 o'clock. 2018, my wife and I adopted a Greyhound. I don't know how long we've got, Robert, because I could talk about this for days and weeks. Anyway, I ended up joining the Border Greyhound Rescue about a year and a half ago. And it's a very small organization. It's on a shoestring budget, hugely dependent on volunteers, and does the most astonishing, heartwarming work, taking greyhounds that the industry doesn't want and lovingly rehabilitating and rehoming them. And when I say doesn't want, I think most of us know what happens to the ones that the industry doesn't really want. There's a huge amount of care that goes into it, and into matching the right human and the right hound. But for me, I have met some of the best, most decent, most compassionate people I could ever hope to meet. And there's some senior executives there, professionals, lawyers, architects, engineers, people working in senior government roles, business owners, through to students, and pretty much every walk of life. And the organization is actually fantastic. I mean, awarded Outstanding Rescue Group of the Year in Australia. One of our volunteers was awarded Volunteer of the Year. And I feel very lucky that they let me hang around and contribute whatever I can.
Well, let me ask you this, Jeremy, about that. Would you say it would be, or would it be fair to say that these people that you've met who are outstanding, it's because they have a shared passion for this good cause? And is that why your network is growing with people who feel the same way as you do, and offering you the same level of respect for being as passionate as they are?
Look, it is undoubtedly, if you get involved with Greyhound Rescue, you have joined a cult. There's no question about it. But these are actually outstanding people in their own rights. Many of them are hugely successful.
I understand that, but my
the
point was,
commonality is
my point was, are you finding them even more fantastic and outstanding because they share your passion?
they could be passionate about other causes. It's the decency, the compassion, the humanity, the best of humanity that we're seeing. And look, I don't want to go into this in too much detail, but I think if you look at the greyhound racing industry in Australia, you've got two very, very different extremes here. You've got some of the worst of Australia, and in these rescue organisations, you've got some of the best conduct you'll find in Australia.
I'm sure it's not
But
just Australia, though. I'm sure that
well, you can.
wherever this particular sport is, I'm sure that.
It's here. It's here. We're the ones with most of it. But
Okay.
I just want to just close with a little thought on this because you really, and as we were talking before about Dolly Parton, you just can't put a price on the personal satisfaction and personal reward you get from contributing to a cause that you care about. But this is where I just want to quickly touch on that notion of let a good cause find you, because I think many people are told you've got to get on the board of a charity or a not-for-profit organization because it's prestigious or because it offers good networking opportunities and good career opportunities. And maybe it does, but when a cause finds you and touches your heart and you really care about it deeply, truly, madly, the rewards are absolutely unmatched.
So the final question for this point is, how do you let a cause find you?
That's a one that I'd probably have to think about for a bit, because I know how this one found me, and it just found me through my children. But my point is that there are so many causes out there. Don't chase the one that you think has the most prestige or is best for your career. Chase the one that touches your heart.
That is excellent advice. And I would say to find the one that touches your heart, you need to be out there looking around. You can't have your eyes closed. Excellent point. Well, thank you for that. I enjoyed that. Let me move on to point number 5, Jeremy.
Yes, you'll like the anecdote here.
And I like the point because I will share this with you. Because I've known you for a while, because I respect you, and I would be proud to say that we're friends. When I first met you, I thought, man, this guy is just pissing me off. But it did not stop me respecting you. And that is your point. People don't have to like you to respect you. I do like you now, by the way, and respect you, but initially, you're talking the initial point. So, it's an excellent point. Can you share with us some of your experience on this?
Well, look, first of all, it is nice when people like you. I mean, there's no question about it. It can be beneficial. You get more leeway, you get more second chances, but it's not always going to achieve what you want. And fairly early in the business relationship I've got with my business partner, we each had our own company, and then we worked together for a while, and then we formed one unit, one brand. But very early in the business relationship, he took me to a meeting with a long-term client of his. And we were going to work on a communications piece that was aimed at helping them win new business. So I needed to understand stuff like what the differentiators and their key selling points were. And sat in this client's office, and a small round table in a meeting room. Clients telling me all about their products and services, and I'm holding my pen and it's hovering above the paper. And after 15 minutes, she turned to me and said, "Why haven't you written anything?" And after 15 minutes, she said to me, "Why haven't you written anything? Why aren't you taking any notes?" And I rather arrogantly and rather ungraciously said, "Well, because you haven't said anything worth writing." Now,
Well, that sounds like you, Jeremy.
oh, it does, it does. And it was rude. And but it wasn't off the cuff. It was actually a very deliberate move on my part, because on many occasions I've talked to people about their company's products. And so, sorry, I have a greyhound who wants to get into the podcast here. I talk to people about their company's products and services, and they just trot out these well-worn phrases mixed with a few cliches. And there's usually something about their commitment to clients and shifting some paradigms and all those lovely things. And I'm fairly sure that they're not going to be persuaded by content that vacuous if they were on the receiving end of it. And I've got no idea why they expect other people to believe it when they're dishing it out. Much of the time it's, you prod gently like you're doing, and you ask for another level of information, you ask for a bit more detail. But sometimes you just got to jolt them out of this sort of lazy jargon, non-thinking thinking, and make them work a bit harder. And they don't tend to like me for that. And I suppose potentially it could cost me a client, although it hasn't happened yet. But
So what was the outcome, though? After you told her, what was the outcome?
Well, the outcome was this. She wasn't happy. She was very miffed, but she ended up providing me some really, really good insights, which we were able to turn into really good communication. The upshot was this. On the next project, she said to my business partner, "I want Jeremy to work on this. Just don't bring him to any meetings."
Well, as you said, you don't have to like you to respect you. But look, that is a very it's a very tenuous lesson, only because if you don't have the wherewithal to be able to read the situation, read the person, you could really damage a relationship.
Yep.
So while I see the lesson and I understand it, and I'm sure our listeners do, be very cautious when you apply that to your lives. You're not all Jeremy Richman. You're not all going to be able to tell a client that they're idiots and get away with it.
Look, there is something that's very defined about the work that I was doing at the time, and I needed to get information from them. And if I hadn't done that, I would have walked away with a bag of fluff, which I couldn't have used,
Yep.
would have done the client a disservice, would have done me no good at all. My reputation doesn't get enhanced by turning out fluff. But I think you can extrapolate this to other areas. I mean, if I need to undergo surgery, there may be a surgeon who's okay, but has a wonderful bedside manner, and another one who's sort of gruff, antisocial, doesn't have a clue about small talk, but is brilliant at surgery. And I'd rather have the latter cut me open than the former.
Agreed. Agreed. But again, it takes a very specific type of personality to be able to get away with being blunt. And if it's not within your personality to do that, you come off inauthentic, you come off arrogant. But with you, Jeremy, that was within your personality. There was nothing inauthentic about you and your approach when I was dealing with you. There was nothing inauthentic. It wasn't all wine and roses, but it was, I need to get this done if you want the best result. I get that. And this is a very, it's a very powerful lesson. But again, be very cautious how it's applied. But it's true. People don't have to like you to respect you. But by the same token, you don't, you will only be respected by people who you respect. And if you approach it from that angle as well, then I think, it's a winning formula. Let's move on to lesson number 6. Engage on topics that you are told to avoid. Now, I really don't think this is wise at all, Jeremy. We've been told many times to avoid religion and politics. We've been told not to talk about, personal issues. And now you're saying, yeah, go ahead, have a conversation about it. I don't know how well that's going to go.
I don't know how well it's going to go either, but you're right. People are told emphatically, stay away from politics, stay away from religion, stay away from personal comments. And in general, people accept that as a wise policy. Look, I know of a professional services firm, people were just told, hey, look, don't comment on some new item of clothing that a colleague of yours is wearing. So I couldn't say to you, nice coat, Robert. That was sort of frowned upon. And I personally think this is actually quite dangerous and it's quite damaging, and that we should talk to people.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Well, because we need to learn how to address difficult issues that we've got a difference of opinion on. We need to learn how to understand other people's perspective, and we need to learn how to persuade them of the merit of our argument, and we need to learn to do that in a way that's respectful and civilized. And I think there's a couple of important aspects to this. One is this whole issue about embracing diversity. If all we're doing is embracing diversity by saying, well, that means we engage with people who've got a different skin color to ours, or a different country of origin, or a different native language, that's not diversity. We need diversity of perspectives, of views, of beliefs, of ideas, of accepted wisdoms. We need a diversity of experiences. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that brings new and interesting thinking into play.
True.
But the other side of that is, if you look at what's going on around the world at the moment, because people are not managing these conversations, they're taking more and more intolerant stands, they're taking more and more extremist stands, they're not listening to each other, there's no dialogue, they're not persuading each other, they don't get the other side, they just assume they're uninformed fools or enemies. And there's you must remember that SBS program, Go Back to Where You Came From. Have you seen
SBS is an Australian television broadcaster that specialises in non-English programs. And no, I don't actually remember that particular program.
This program, they took a group of Australians who had some very, very firm views on asylum seekers, a hot topic in this country for quite a while now, and they gave them the opportunity to experience what those people had gone through, so why they'd left their home countries and the risks they took and the dangers they faced. And they learned, they understood. Some of them you could see completely change their position, others didn't budge at all. But they had conversations that went beyond slogans, and they learned to see the world a little bit more the way other people saw it. You know that expression about, walk a mile in another man's shoes and you'll be a mile away and you'll have their shoes.
Yes, I remember that very clearly. I mean, I built my entire philosophy around that. Look, the point you're making is very valid. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's ethereal. I can't see it happening today, as much as you have enlightened people who want to do this. And I know that you do this, I do this. We read broadly so we can see all sides of an argument. I understand that. But also, taking what you have just said, it is a difficult concept for people who haven't got what we've got, haven't got the privilege that you and I have had in our lives, in living in this wonderful country of Australia as we do. So it's very hard. It's going to be hard for them to do that, especially when the world is so polarized. as you've pointed out.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I understand that having these conversations would help bridge that gap. But let me give you an anecdote. This was back in 2016, and a friend of mine was discussing the American political scene. He's an American living in Australia, and he was from Texas originally, and he served in the military and everything else. He was a lovely bloke, and he was talking to me about the Republican candidate at the time in 2016. And, you know, we would joke backwards and forwards. You know, I would call him a Fox News watcher. He would call me a leftist communist. It was a joke. We took it as a joke. However, once things started heating up, he started getting more radical. To the point where on a telephone call one day, I just couldn't speak to him anymore. And he said to me, this is what he said to me, word for word, Jeremy. You know, you just made the same point my rabbi made to me. You know, he got angry at me too. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, if your rabbi has told you to piss off because you're spouting garbage, why aren't you listening? And I truthfully have not really spoken to him since. Tried to have a conversation, but he couldn't have that conversation with me. And look, I'll also take responsibility. I couldn't have that conversation with him because we weren't listening to each other. We were just trying to tell each other what each other should be thinking. And isn't that the point you're making?
I'm not making the point of necessarily changing somebody's mind.
No.
What I'm making the point is that we need to learn to have these passionate debates with people, even if we don't convince the other side at all. And even if you walk away not necessarily as friends, but you just walk away with more respect and more understanding, then you've actually built a powerful relationship and a bridge, which you talked about before, that's very, very hard to tear down.
I mean, this is a very, very large point. We can talk about this for a long time because there's a lot of hurt at the moment in Australia, in the US, in Europe, in the UK, in almost every country in the world has got this division. And I understand what you're saying. Talk to people, engage in the topics that you've been told to avoid, and see whether or not you can find common ground, or just at least try to understand their point of view. Is that correct?
Yeah, just try and see the world a little bit the way they see it, and try and get them to see the world a little bit the way you see it, and learn that there are alternatives to taking extremist positions. If more of us do that, then the extremists really are sitting out there alone on the extreme edges.
Well, as I said, I can talk to you about this forever, but it does also segue into your next point, which is lesson number 7. What you say may not be what they hear.
Yes, well, one benchmark for this was actually my son. When he was a toddler, and we were driving, and I was in the front seat driving, and he was in the back strapped to a booster seat. And he picked up a bit of a cough, and he was coughing repeatedly and quite annoyingly. And after a few minutes, I turned to him and said, "Julian," because that's his name, "please put your hand over your mouth." And he did. And he coughed again, and he gave me a look of total disappointment and said, "It's not working." Now, I had such a clear purpose in communicating my request, and he had an entirely different benefit in mind in carrying it out. And that has actually served me as a benchmark in terms of communication as well. And it's a big part of what we do within iLevel, within my business, which is being attuned to the audience's level of knowledge and the way they're likely to interpret things. And you know, our standpoint is that we try to make communication as simple as it needs to be, but no simpler. So you're not going to get much traction if you're trying to convince a sophisticated investor to put some money into a private equity fund if you start explaining 101 stuff to them about what compound interest is, or the fact that an investment fund's a way of pooling money so you can buy something bigger than you can buy on your own. So, you know, you kind of, you get bitten by these things over the years, and you carry the bruises, and you learn that not only people may not interpret things the way you want them to, they don't follow the communication process the way you want them to.
What do you mean by that? They don't follow the communication process?
Well, I'll give you an example here. Many years ago, we produced a really beautiful corporate capability brochure for an international search company. One of the big names, very well-known headhunting firm. This was one of those documents with, you know, incredibly impressive production values. Absolutely lovely to hold, and it had this compelling written and visual story that started on page 1, finished on page last, and in between we thought each section was very cleverly building on the one preceding it to reach this wonderful conclusion. And the chairman loved it. We were very proud of our work. And then I saw him hand it to a client in his office. And the client picked up this brochure and flipped through it backwards, starting from the back page towards the front, stopping at a few random pages. And that was a very, very, very painful, but a very, very important lesson.
Yep. Okay. I get that, but how would that happen in conversation?
I'm not looking at this so much in conversation. Again, a lot of our work is we're working on behalf of clients to put information in front of their clients in a way that we need them to consume it. And you just cannot predict the route that somebody will take through a website or through an app or through a printed brochure.
Okay. So in real life, I get that now. I understand what you're saying now. And that's true. That's true. That's why you have, you know, user flows on website. So that people can see. That's why Google Analytics tells you what page people land on. That's why you have all of this. Yep, I get that. But your anecdote with your son is probably the most powerful thing I've heard in a while, by the way. And
I'll let him know.
It's just so it's just so clear. You know, if you could present your requirements. Or as you say, if you say something to someone that they hear and understand, then your life would be easier. But if you say to something to someone who doesn't hear what you've asked them or doesn't interpret it the same way, it's going to make your life a little difficult. Yep.
Or interesting in this case.
Or interesting. Thank you, Jeremy.
He's been a very interesting child.
Okay, lesson number 8. Be clear on where you fit in your clients' lives. Well, Jeremy, I don't fit anywhere in my clients' lives. They have their own thing. They're clients. Why should I even fit in their lives?
Well, this bit probably applies a bit more to, well, the simple explanation that I give for this probably fits a bit more into a pre or post COVID world, but you know, we can dream. So let me give you an example.
Yep.
You're at the office, it's getting close to 1 o'clock, lunchtime, it's a busy day, you've got a lot of work to do, you want some food and you want some coffee, and you walk around the corner to a deli that sells good, fresh, nutritious food, and you buy a container of tofu and mung bean salad and a bottle of water and a carob crunch and a takeaway coffee, and you're back at your desk 12 minutes later. And tomorrow you've got a client visiting from interstate, and you want to show them that you value them and you love them and appreciate the effort they've made to come visit you, and you book a table at a great restaurant with water views and maybe a bit of local character and a place that they wouldn't find on their own, and you spend a couple of hours and you enjoy some fine dining with them. And it's very, very easy to see where those two different eateries fit into your life. But you see so many companies that are trying to be everything to everyone. And if clients don't know where to place you within the context of the things they need to do, they're not going to bother trying to figure it out. They're just not going to put you anywhere. And that's my point in this.
I still don't get it. I still don't quite understand. If I'm going to fit into my clients' lives, it'll be in a business sense.
I am talking about a business sense. I'm not talking about a personal sense.
No, in a business sense. And I will only fit into their business life in a very slim category of where they need me or my service.
Yep.
Beyond that, my clients would never think of me. They wouldn't even concern.
I'm not suggesting that they do, but I'm saying within the context of that little slim piece of light that you belong in, and you can provide them the services they need, solve their problems, help them achieve whatever opportunities they're after. You need to be able to articulate that. You need to be able to demonstrate that to people. And when you've just got these sort of broad explanations of we do all sorts of wonderful things and they're great, and you're asking clients or potential clients to figure out how your services will fit into aiding their business, you're asking them to do something that they will not do. You have to tell them, not sort of go, hey, we do stuff. If you need stuff, come to us. You need to be able, in the same way that those very simple, the simple deli and the nice restaurant, you know exactly when you want that one, when you want that one. You need to be able to do that at a business level as well.
In that anecdote, the deli is the client. Or the deli is you're the client and the deli is
you're the deli's client.
Yeah, right.
The deli's the supplier, you're the client, the fancy restaurant's the supplier. By the way, just a cute, useful little tip that I picked up somewhere, and I can't remember where, but if you trust a place that you're going to take a client to, and you should trust them, because if you don't trust them...
Why are you taking your client there? Yep.
Yeah. What I've learned to do is actually pay the bill well before the booking. So if the booking's at 1 o'clock, I'll go in there at 12 o'clock, hand over my credit card, tell them to tot up the bill, add 10%, and that's it. And then when you're finished eating, you decide, you done, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client? Sure, and you just get up and walk out to very perplexed looks on their side.
Yep, and that works. I see how that would work very well too, because there is an element of unpleasantness when it comes to a bill.
Oh, yes.
So, very clever. That's a good tip. Thank you very much for that. All right. Well, that was rather deep, Jeremy. that was rather deep, but in a nutshell, I think it's a very very important lesson for a lot of people to understand, especially in business. Understand where you fit, even in your personal lives. Understand where you fit in with your friends and with your family. You can't be all things to all people, but that's great. I like that. All right, so let's move on to lesson number 9. Writing is hard work. It should be the last thing you do. Okay, I know many authors, and they agree with you that it's hard work, but why, Jeremy, is it the last thing that you should do?
Well, first of all, it is hard work, but let's again just put this in context. We're talking about business writing here, not people writing novels, not people for whom writing is their profession.
Well, writing is your profession. You know.
It is, and so I'm going to provide a little bit of an insight into the way I work around this stuff, which is mainly you sit staring at the computer until little beads of blood appear on your forehead. But that's not a technique that I necessarily recommend. But look, I remember working actually with an American executive. He was based here in Australia, and he was incredibly articulate, as many Americans are. And when he spoke, he was fluid and he was full of expression. It was actually a pleasure to sit back and listen to him. Then I was totally floored when I received a page he had written that was to be used as a forward for, I think it was an industry report, and it was dull and it was stilted and it was full of jargon, and I couldn't help but cringe just reading it. And I've seen a lot of business people write the same way, and a lot of people struggle to write, and I think that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, it's down to one reason. They start the process of writing by writing. Now, what I mean by that is they write the first sentence or paragraph, then they rewrite it and write it again and again and again. And, you know, in the old days, you would have had a rubbish bin full of papers torn out of the typewriter in despair, and now you just have electronic version of that. But the fact that we're saving the trees hasn't actually solved that problem. So if I can run through how I go about this,
Please.
maybe there'll be some benefit for somebody. So first of all, you start by being crystal clear on what your objective is. What do you want people to do when they read or hear what you write? How do you want them to respond? How do you want them to feel? Are there perceptions that you need to change? Key facts that they don't have that you want them to have? You need to have an objective. Then you work out what your messages should be to achieve that objective. So what do you need to tell them? What messages will change the perceptions? What facts will enable them to make the decisions that you want them to make? Down to what tone of voice. You know, even if you're writing an email to a colleague or a boss, you know, do you want to keep it light? Do you need to keep it light? What do you need to do? And as you're doing this, you just jot this content down in no particular order using whatever software you're comfortable with or pen and paper, and you just dump this content. Then you create a structure. So what order do I need to communicate this information in? And you try and think through that from your audience's perspective, not necessarily from your own. And by the way, just another tip, and it was a very good idea I encountered when writing emails, but I think it applies just as well to verbal communication, is to start by stating what you want. And a lot of people write their emails and they provide you with a background, they provide you with all sorts of outlines of issues and touch on the solution. And then finally, at the very, very end, they get to the request, what they want you to do. And I think a much better option, and again, I didn't come up with this, but I've adopted it and I love it, is you tell people at the very beginning what you want, and then you tell them why and what the benefits will be. Anyway, going back to the structure, you've got a structure, you've got all these bits and pieces that you've jotted down. You put all the messages where they belong within that structure. You move them around because they don't, you know, you're not going to put them in the right place initially. Then when you've done all of that, your head is clear. You sit down and you can actually turn your mind to smithing the words. And if you think that process takes too long, just compare it to writing that opening paragraph 20 times.
No, I don't think it takes too long. I think it's a great process. It's a great technique to use and learn, and I thank you for sharing it with us. Many years ago, you just reminded me of a couple of lessons that we were taught. Many years ago, within my circle was a screenwriter. He wrote for your being English or being British, you would understand this show. He wrote for a British comedian called Dick Emery.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you know, David, that's the writer's name. He was wonderful. We had a good relationship, and he would. This is back in the days of newsletters. He would help write newsletters and make them humorous and stuff. He was very, very good. And the advice that David shared with us is just write. Don't edit, just write. And just write the whole thing, then go back and then rewrite it, then go back and which is what you've just said. You know, writing that first paragraph 20 times. That was his advice to us, is write it 20 times. And then when I think about when I first got into business, I would write letters to clients. Back then, those letters, introductory letter to a client, you're going to love this, Jeremy, 3 pages long. And this is exactly what you have just said. All the crap, all the fluff in the beginning, this aren't we wonderful, we've been in business, we've done this, we can do that, these are our clients. By the way, can I have an appointment? Right at the bottom of page 3. Now, today, I struggle to put 2 paragraphs together because it's so concise. So I hear you.
Perfect.
And that process is brilliant. Well done. Thank you.
Can I just point out, when I'm talking about this process, you're talking about a professional writer there. That's what he does for a living, day in, day out.
Used to do. Passed away a long time ago. You know.
Doesn't anymore. Fair enough. My point is, this is a process I'm recommending to people who are in business, but writing is not what they're hired for.
Yep.
And
well, I'm going to take... Hang on. I'm going to take issue with you.
Okay.
Today, in the world we live today, writing should be what we're all hired for. You're going to have to confirm your details or your advice or your proposal with a client, or with friends or whatever. You're going to have to confirm what you say eventually via email or something. So everyone has to know how to write succinctly.
But their job title is not writer.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I would strongly advise people to rewind, listen to those points again. Make sure you jot down Jeremy's instructions, because it will help you be more succinct. It will help you clear your head and add clarity to your messaging. So thanks for that, Jeremy.
I think if I wanted to summarize that, it's think before you write.
Excellent advice for anybody. Actually, excellent advice for any part of your life. Especially, don't drunk text. It's all right, I'll edit that out. Okay, let's go to lesson number 10, which is something I don't understand. So, Jeremy, you're going to have to explain this, because it's just... It just doesn't sit well with me. Lesson number 10. Your best clients leave you alone. Why do I want my clients to leave me alone, Jeremy?
Well, in my case, they're my best clients. They're my hardest clients to deal with. And to an extent, it's because they know me too well for my own good. They know that I care about my work. They know that my team cares about the work, and that we'll keep at a project longer and invest more in it when they leave us alone. And I think the lesson cuts across beyond my limited sphere to pretty much the whole work spectrum. When you micromanage people, you take the responsibility and accountability off your shoulders. It's off their shoulders. It's almost physical. You can see it lift off their shoulders. They're no longer responsible exclusively for the output. It's now a shared task. I can go back to one of the earlier experiences, which is in the days when dinosaurs roamed the earth and typesetting was done with bromides. Now, most people listening to this wouldn't have a clue what that is. Bromides in typesetting is basically type produced on photographic paper.
Yep.
So cut up, laid out together with the images by graphic artists, who then creates the artwork that the printing plates were made from, and all of this was completely made redundant when desktop publishing came in.
Yep.
Anyway, I was responsible for a large corporate project for a holding company that was showcasing, I think they had a couple of dozen large companies in their portfolio, and I wanted to make sure it was done right. So I went to the typesetting company to work with my designer and the bromide machine operator. And that was I don't know if I made a mistake, but I certainly learned from it because I spotted an error in one of the first bromides to come out of the machine and pointed it out. And at that moment, the whole dynamic of the work changed and I became the backstop. They just did stuff, handed it to me for approval, and it took the weight off their shoulders and put it onto mine. And as I said, I see that happen repeatedly across the spectrum with suppliers that we work with. And as I said, you can feel a physical shift when the mentality goes from thinking about how to do something to tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's where I'm saying that, yes, your input as a client is obviously required, but once you've briefed somebody, stop micromanaging them, leave them alone, let them suffer for their art, let them do whatever it is they need to do until they're turning over some work that they think, not it's work that you, the client, would accept, but it's work that they would accept.
That's an excellent
hopefully
point.
that standard has got to be higher.
Yeah, work that they would accept. And I'll bring that point to, going back to what you just said, to a managerial perspective. So if you delegate and then you allow your people to actually do the job, they will do it. And yes, they'll screw up occasionally and then they will learn from that. But if you micromanage them, as you pointed out, they're not going to learn. And that's right, that shift that you're talking about, Jeremy, will never occur, and they will always be substandard subordinates, rather than being, moving to the level where they will one day, take over your position or be your boss. So yeah, I get the point, and I get it from a client's point of view too. But doesn't that all rest on the fact that, going back to your very, very first point, moments of truth, the value, having that authenticity about you, having that integrity, wouldn't you need that for a client to leave you alone to do the job because they trust you?
Yeah, but as I said, well, I'm talking about this from my perspective. So it's my best clients are the ones who leave me alone. They're also the toughest ones for me to work with because I'm forcing myself to do the absolute best I can because they're leaving me alone.
So you've raised their expectations of what you're going to deliver.
Yeah, that's always dangerous. And one of the silliest lines you'll ever hear is people promising to exceed your expectations, which is right up there with promising you a surprise birthday party.
Okay. That's some very good advice, Jeremy. That's some very good advice. Well, we've just gone through all your 10 lessons, and before I let you go, we have one last question for you. In your career, in your 50 plus years, what have you unlearned? This is a lesson or this is something that you held on to as truth, as the paragon of your belief system, and then something happened, you gained more experience, more wisdom, and went, yeah, I don't believe that anymore.
Well, what I've actually got for you here is a personal story, not a business story.
That's fine.
And this happened not long after we arrived in Sydney. And we were exploring around Darling Harbour. And I was on the upper level of Darling Harbour on the bridge that goes across to Pyrmont.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that same son again in his pram. And my wife and daughter were wandering around the ground level where the harbour is. I think there was somewhere near the aquarium. And I don't know why, but we were pretty much alone on the bridge. There was nobody else. And we were heading towards the escalators. And then suddenly this big bloke appeared. The full punk gear, the boots, the nose ring, the muscle t-shirt, the spiky hair, scary as anything. And he was striding purposefully at 90 degrees to us. And he was going to cut us off just before we reached the escalators. And he did. He got there just before we did. And he's blocking our way. And he looked directly at me, and he looked at the pram and said, "Mate, do you want a hand getting that down the stairs?" And I unlearned a hell of a lot that day.
Well, yep. Sort of a don't judge a book by its cover story for you.
A little bit of that, and that clothes maketh the man? No.
Well, especially coming from the UK, I'm sure that the punk scene for you would have been very different to the punk scene in Australia.
Oh yeah, and that was where a lot of my trepidation came from.
Mm.
So I thought we were in for a real problem. No.
Yeah.
I unlearned an awful lot there.
That's wonderful, Jerry. Okay, and with that, I think we will call it a show. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I really appreciate you making time to be with us today. You've been listening to the international podcast of 10 Lessons It Took Me 50 Years to Learn. Our guest today was Jeremy Richman. This episode was sponsored by the Professional Development Forum. PDF provide webinars, social media discussions, podcasts, parties. You can find them at the professionaldevelopmentforum.org. And the best part is that it's all free. And if you enjoyed this podcast, hit your subscribe button so you make sure that you don't miss an episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 10 Lessons It Took Me 50 Years to Learn.